Hi, true avatars, and welcome to your weekly queer video game podcast. This is episode 44, and I am your host, Zoe Wild. I am a transgender and bisexual woman, and my pronouns are she, her. This week is going to be a little different, as I'm currently in the process of moving, so I'm way too busy to record a proper episode with news, queer game of the week, etc. I'm really sorry. Just things are pretty wild here at the moment, and that's not really a pun with my last name either. I'm just really busy. But I will be back to catch up with the news in a few weeks. In the meantime, though, I've pre-recorded an interview with betalars, the lead developer behind Frame of Mind, a Game of Thoughts. This interview was recorded on Sunday, July 20th. You can wishlist Frame of Mind, a Game of Thoughts on Steam right now. Additionally, through the Steam page, you can find a link to the game's Discord server. And now, I'll begin the pre-recorded interview. Hi, true avatars. I would like to welcome betalars, the lead developer behind Frame of Mind, a Game of Thoughts. betalars is a non-binary / gender-fluid person from Germany who goes by they/them pronouns. They are autistic and have ADHD. Hi, betalars. Thanks for joining me.
Hi. Nice to be here.
So how are you doing today?
It's Disability Pride Month, so we're allowed to talk about disabilities. I'm right now in a kind of rough time because squirrel brain and heat is not a good combination, and also there's like a lot of social stuff that's really annoying right now. So I'm not doing great, but I'm happy to be here and talk about experiences that my game shows.
Well, I really appreciate the honesty. I think it's super great because I feel like your game very much reflects who you are, both with neurodivergence and honesty, and just like exploring thought processes. Like I think just our email chain in general has been like more exploratory than most email chains I have ever had with anyone. I found it very refreshing.
You know what I find always interesting? First of all, like my thing that I do just to be easy to work with is really surprising to a lot of people and sometimes even threatening and irritating. But also, like, a lot of the thoughts in the game are kind of my thoughts, and just things where I say to myself, yeah, these are like some thoughts that I have, and I'm not proud of, but I have those thoughts. So why are they never in a game? And I put them in a game, and like people say, oh my God, this is the most relatable thing ever. And I go like, yeah, probably because everyone in the media is always masking and like hiding their humanity. And I'm like, why are you doing this? This is weird. Let's not do that.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a very, very like loaded statement, but I think the world would be a better place if we were all just a little bit more honest with each other about thoughts we have, whether they're intrusive or positive or negative, what have you.
You know, I was saying if you're all a little bit more artistic.
Maybe. So just for some listener context, as we discussed back in episode 37.5, which was a bonus episode about Steam Next Fest, Frame of Mind, a Game of Thoughts is a point-and-click cozy game in which you explore various locations from the history of the player character's life. You will engage with these objects in these locations and experience the memories that the character associates with these objects. In particular, memories and experiences related to growing up as queer and neurodivergent. Frame of Mind, a Game of Thoughts uses a clever mind board aspect in its gameplay, where after exploring the memories in a location, the player is presented with related thoughts on several cue cards. You, the player, will then select the thoughts you find most interesting or relevant. These chosen thoughts are added to a corkboard in which you play a match game, connecting the thoughts as they relate to each other and discarding the ones you feel don't fit. It is a visualization of processing one's own thoughts. While described as a cozy game, it is also meant to explore heavier and more explicit subject matter with the purpose of bringing about empathy in the player. The game is clear about this upfront by including thorough content warnings. So, I always like to start with like an icebreaker question. I do this for the guest's benefit, but mostly for mine because I'm usually nervous when I'm meeting someone. Usually when I interview someone, it's like I meet them for the first time. So to kind of like take the edge off a little bit, I like to ask if you'd be interested in discussing a couple of your favorite video games.
Yes. Right now, I actually need to continue playing one of my favorite video games, which is Spiritfarer. I love the game to bits because it's a non-combat game. I have a very big fun thing for non-combat games, and also because like it's a sweet game about caring, and it also deals with very heavy topics in a very light-hearted way. It is actually a huge inspiration for the project that is going to be next after Frame of Mind. And also one of the things that's annoying in my life right now is mourning. So I think being able to get back into this game is probably going to be helpful for me a bit. I have a thing for every game made by that game company. So Journey, The Pathless, which is kind of like, I don't think it's like the same company, but a lot of the same people that work on it. And my weird thing is I have a thing for rally games. So like this is like my one odd genre that is like not connected to any like narrative stuff that I usually like. So like, oh my god, if I had to settle on one game that I like the most, it is watching other people play Beginner's Guide. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're a creative person, play the Beginner's Guide and play it with other people and then discuss what you think about the game. Highly recommend.
I think some of my favorite experiences with any kind of like movies or video games is like if once you've played it the first time, it's always fun to explore it through someone else. I showed one of my friends my favorite movie, or one of my favorite movies, a few months ago, and I was just kind of watching him more than I was watching the movie because I was like, I know how I reacted to this before, but now I want to see how you react. It's like experiencing it for the first time again. It's the closest you can ever get.
Yes, it's so fun.
So
because you also see the twists coming, and you see them see their thoughts about these on their faces, and you can also have to be quiet. It's so good.
Yeah. So let's move into some more game development talk. I'm curious, how have your autism and ADHD diagnoses, oh, I'm stumbling, I'm so sorry, affected your career?
I mean, it's safe to say that a lot of people in the game industry have ADHD because like you kind of have to have like a lot of, and also like a lot of people have autism. Because like you have to have like these strong interests into like a bunch of different topics and like a lot of motivation and creative thinking, but also technical understanding and studying it at the same time. And it's like such a rare set of skills that about kind of happens to come with being autistic and having ADHD. So I think the fact that I'm even attempting this is definitely also a sign. And like also like the fact that I'm attempting the kind of games that I'm making. So actually, speaking of favorite games, one of the games I think is most influential is, for me as a game developer, has been Spec Ops: The Line. Do you know it?
I don't think so, no. It sounds vaguely familiar, though.
So it's like a game from the era of like these cover shooters, third person, like Gears of War. It plays in a Dubai that's been surrounded by a sandstorm and enclosed by a sandstorm, and you play some US Marines to try to save the day. So like typical game bullshit narrative. But it actually makes you do messed up things. And it actually like tries to deal with the cruelty of war. And I think it is one of the few pieces of media that I would call anti-war, because it makes you hate yourself through the actions that you choose to do in that game. And I mean, sometimes it's forcing your hand because it's like a game and it needs to tell a narrative. But it also lets you do, it just allows you to be cruel. And then you choose to be cruel even if you don't have to. And I think this is incredibly powerful. And what is also really tragic about this game is that the developers, when asked after the game if they want to do it again, they said they would rather eat glass.
Oh
so
gosh.
the financial insecurity of having to develop such a game, and the also the psychological burden of having to deal with all these heavy topics has been so horrible that the developers never wanted to do anything like this ever again. If the whole entire German games industry didn't decide this studio needs to survive, they would have been definitely dead, like bankrupt. Now they're owned by Tencent, so I guess they're never going to do any serious game ever again. And this is like, I want to do public broadcast games. So games that don't need to worry about being financially successful, but that exist because they must exist. And they exist because they're dealing with certain topics that need to be discussed for the public benefit, but it can't exist in a for-profit system. And I think this perspective on the world and this approach to telling stories is very unusual and definitely autism moment of me. So yes, like the path that I've found, and also my ability to like pick up so many skills that I can like develop a highly polished looking game on my own, is definitely where my ADHD and my autism really helped me. However, especially when it comes to like managing social connections, surviving conventions, and right now also dealing with stress, working consistently, preventing burnout. I'm struggling a lot with ADHD and focus right now. And my game really needs, frame of mind needs to get done, needs to be done. And it is right now delaying a lot because of my mental health.
That's fair. I mean, something I've learned is like when I'm working for someone versus like managing my own podcast, like it's like, for me, it's sometimes a struggle to like self-manage my own time. Like when I have a boss looming over my shoulder with a deadline, like it's very easy for me to just like kind of put my own comfort on the back burner to get something done, whether I want to do it or not. Whereas like if I have to do something for the podcast and this doesn't apply to our delay in communication. That was purely busyness. But when I do have something to do, I'm always like, well, actually, to be honest, it did have a little bit to do with it, because we got in touch about doing an interview and you sent a very kind email. And then I waited a few weeks longer than I should have to reply to it, because in my head, I was like, but this isn't the most urgent thing. There are other more urgent things with the podcast. And so sometimes it's really hard to just kind of sit down and be like, okay, no, all of these things are urgent because all of these are different people and connections that you're juggling, right? So I've definitely experienced that to some degree as well. So I understand like the kind of like self-discipline that's like necessary in spite of your mental health. Like it's hard to overcome sometimes.
But the thing is, I have the opposite issue. So when I do stuff on my own, I get lost in details and I overwork myself, and I like do 1,000 things that will make me never finish something, and that also take up so much time in my day that I forget to eat, forget to take breaks, and then I become unproductive not because I'm taking too much breaks and taking care of myself too much, but because my work is too much fun.
That's fair. I mean, without the mental health aspects aside, like it's kind of good that at least you have a project that is so much fun that you're kind of like, I mean, it's not good that you might forget to eat, but like the fact that, yeah.
It's not fun right now anymore. So easy. Like starting to work on games is really fun, because you get to explore new games and new concept and new narrative things. But right now everything is settled and everything just needs to get done, and you need to implement silly stuff like save games and do social media and all that stuff. And this is really where game development is just a marathon, and you hate it. And maybe somebody like just thrives in like this environment of like, yeah, getting it done. But I think like most people just hate finishing games.
Well, speaking of the game development process, it's a small team that's currently developing Frame of Mind. It's just you and one other person. So I'm curious, like, if you could talk a little bit more about what the process is like and what working with this other person is like too.
This is really funny. So first of all, the core team is me and Lynn. I have had a bit of help in some things that I'm not that good at, for example, composing. And obviously I can speak like the teen girl that we are exploring in the first half of my room, of my game. First room in my game. And I also have like here and there a bit of help in programming to manage the load. But yeah, I do most of the stuff like in the game myself. And Lynn is actually doing everything that I utterly hate. So Lynn is doing the social media. Lynn is applying my game for Next Fest and organizing podcasts and doing these kind of outreach work. Lynn is looking for funding to get a game studio up and running. Lynn is kind of... I think I need to get Lynn to do a bit more micromanagement for me, because I'm struggling with that a little bit right now. But also Lynn is really stressed right now because of like she also has to do a lot of finance stuff and contract work that needs to happen right now, and that takes up a lot of her time unnecessarily because bureaucracy is dumb. And I'm so glad that I don't have to worry about that in my game right now. So yeah, we couldn't be more different in terms of skill set, but we also couldn't be more similar in terms of how we want to work. Like, what do we consider to be a healthy workplace culture? What do we consider to be good visions a studio should have? And this is why we, like about a year ago when we met each other, just immediately connected. And yeah, since then have been working on to getting Frame of Mind done in a professional way and establish our name, Polynomial Games, and then continue the next project.
It sounds like a very symbiotic relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I was playing the demo, I connected thoughts on the mind board, and when I'd matched all the thoughts in a way that made sense to me, the game told me that my connections didn't match with the way Lisa would connect them. And for context, I don't think I said the character's name at the beginning of the podcast, but the character's name is Lisa. So later I went to YouTube. So later I went to watch other playthroughs, and I saw you had released a devlog explaining that the game now allowed players to match thoughts with any other thoughts that they like, that there was no longer a correct answer. Can you explain why you made this change and how it's affected development?
So this actually was intended to be a puzzle game. So you were supposed to figure out that character, and I assumed like people would play it just to figure out what growing up as a neurodivergent person means. I quickly realized most people play the game to understand themselves, which is, I think it's really radical, and I really like that. This is like people take this thing I made, and then they decide to make it their own and read stuff into it that I never could have seen. This is so great, and I love every good faith, like, headcanon that I know about this game. And this also made it difficult for me to like allow people to figure out stuff, because like in the first versions, the cards that weren't supposed to stick together would just slide apart, and I quickly got the response in playtesting that people couldn't combine cards that they really wanted to combine. And I don't think I wanted to get into details right now, because that's like kind of personal story. But like I said, yeah, these two cards, nobody would ever want to stick them together. And that person said, yes, I would want to do that because I've experienced that and this and that trauma. And I thought to myself, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to figure out what combinations are fine and what aren't fine. So you can just do whatever. In more recent playtests, a lot of people responded that they feel kind of aimless when playing this game, and they don't understand what they're trying to their goal is, because like the game is so open and basically asks you to find your own goal, which is very unconventional. So I'm probably going to modify the beginning a bit, so you get some sort of premise that you probably should be able to revolt against. But I also introduced the mechanic where the game gives you feedback on, like, basically if you completed the board in a way that I would see fitting.
So I really do like the choice that the players had, because this is like, I'm going to jump back to this later with another question, just because, and I'm going to keep these, I normally I kind of jump around with questions sometimes in an interview, especially if something's related, but I want to keep the darker subject matter towards the end of the episode.
Yes.
So we'll come back to this, and this is just kind of a mark for listeners as well.
But keep a pin in that. I want to talk about content warning versus content notes.
Oh, absolutely. We're gonna, yeah. But speaking of like options though in the game and giving players choice, I noticed you give players the option to use both the controller as well as a mouse and keyboard. Most importantly, you've included content notes for sensitive topics, and I'm curious like what other kinds of accessibility features you've included or are planning to include, because I've only played like a 20-minute vertical slice of the demo. So
funny story. when Steam recently released the the text that you can use to take the accessibility features of a game, my game pretty much just aced everything that would be relevant for single player games. Like there's two options that are just like not important if you're not doing multiplayer. So we obviously didn't check, but all the other things that could just like I fulfilled, which I found really cool. And it actually really saved ours because we're making a game for like non-typical audiences. And like my main idea of the game is a first-person game where you walk through this room and discover it. A lot of non-typical players don't know to use WASD and mouse because that's a really confusing control scheme. If you're not like used to this because you've played 10 years of shooters. So the fact that we've already planned for like a point and click mode that would just be usable with just a touch screen, this would have been an issue. But because we've already planned for this mode, it was just easy to say, yeah, okay, then we're going to probably just move the accessibility settings to a bit more prominent place and maybe ask the player if they want to use first-person controls or if they want to just play the game as a point-and-click adventure. This is also not completely done yet, but it's planned for. I want this game to be playable fully blind.
Okay.
So you can just hear the stories and just like be read out all the thoughts and find the connections that way. That's very important. And yeah, content notes. I prefer to use content notes instead of content warnings because it focuses more of like giving people agency to decide what topics they want to deal with right now, as opposed to like tripping hazard. And if you have a trauma and you don't want to deal with some aspects of my game that cover your trauma, you can choose to skip scenes. You can choose to read neutral descriptions of scenes instead of like listening to a like acted out retelling of a story if you don't want to deal with it. And yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of boring stuff like contrast and font switching and UI scaling. That's obviously also important for accessibility, but it's not so fun to talk about.
Well, I'm sure that a lot of people would really appreciate the ability to skip sections of a story, whether it's a movie, a video game, a book, and just like at the touch of a button. Like
the thing is, you can do that with books and movies. You can just like, okay, I don't want to read this page. Let's go forward. I don't want to see this scene. Just skip ahead. You can do that. You can even in the cinema just like cover your fucking eyes. Sorry, am I allowed to swear in this podcast?
You're allowed to swear. It's completely fine. I have a potty mouth, so we're all good.
Yeah. And you can't do that in games because like they're interactive. You can fail a boss and you can't just like, I don't want to look at this boss fight. That's not possible. And this is like a huge accessibility fail in the games industry, and I really hated so few games just don't allow you to skip a scene or don't allow you to replay a scene. Like Horizon Zero Dawns, I have quit that game because when you've explored one of the forges, you aren't being led back into it, and you have to restart the game to explore the forge. And it wasn't obvious to me that I was like traversing the part of the level where the level would end. So I just stopped playing the game after going to the first forge because it wouldn't let me explore it. And I hate it so much. And my favorite example in about why it is so impossible for developers to know when something might be triggering is the scene in Ori and the Blind Forest where you escape from this tree that is being flooded.
I remember this very well.
I think that's comical enough so people wouldn't necessarily get triggered by it. But there are like these branches that like kind of look like hands that like always claw up from the bottom of the screen. And I thought to myself, well, if I saw someone drown and like remember like maybe their hands like reaching up and trying to not drown, that would be the most horrible thing ever. And I don't blame the developers for not thinking about that, because like this would happen to me too. But I say, well, there should be a convention that you are just allowed to skip ahead in a game when you don't want to deal with a certain topic or a scene, and there's virtually no games that let you do that.
So I'm curious.
Can you think of a single game that?
I to be honest, off the top of my head, not really.
The Talos Principle, actually. The Talos Principle has like this open world approach where you can go to any puzzle in the game, and you don't need to solve it in any order.
That's true. Although generally speaking, like even I think A Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds allows you to do the same thing, and so do like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and maybe even Echoes of Wisdom to some extent. There's some openness to that as well. Although I think the dungeons are still in a partially set order because you have to do the first two before you unlock the rest. But you can do those two in any order. That said, though, in most of those games, I'm not sure about Talos Principle, but the Zelda ones, even though you can choose which order, you still have to complete all of them to get through the game. I think with the exception of being Breath of the Wild, is like you could skip you could go straight to Ganon if you wanted to at the very end of the game and miss that content.
Because Talos Principle has multiple endings, if you want to 100% complete the game, you obviously have to play all of it. But there are multiple cool endings that you can reach without playing the whole game.
Okay, that's cool. I like that. So I'm curious though, for your game, for Frame of Mind, a game of thoughts, when someone does skip something, is there any kind of way, like you mentioned they can go back, but like is there any kind of like bit of text saying like, hey, that's like maybe content friend, like with the content kind of removed a little? I don't know how you would navigate this and how I'm supposed to, and I'm trying to word this in a way that makes sense.
So there's like a user interface that opens when you like click on a memento. And if you have like all these settings disabled, it just automatically plays the game, the scene. But if you have like some skipping options enabled, then there's like a small drop-down menu where the first option is to just play the scene. Second option is to read a neutral summary. Third option is to skip the scene. And if you skip the scene, then the game will let you continue without having these thoughts on your board. But you can still just later decide, I actually still want to listen to it, and then just collect it, and it works.
And so there's nothing missing. Like if you want to, is your game built in such a way that if you like miss a detail, like an important piece of context or information, that like, will you be lost in the next scene without having that information? Forgive me, I've only played one section of the game. Like I've only played the beginner room and then the demo ends there, so I'm not sure how the rest of the game plays out.
So what I can tell, rest of the game is a short journey through time where you kind of decide a path through life. and depending on your choices, you get a few different memories in the second room that would kind of work like the first one.
Okay.
I do realize that one of the stories you can find in that second room doesn't really make a lot of sense when you've skipped one of the first scenes in the game. So I may actually need to think about how to deal with that. But other than that, you're just missing some context. You will not have like all the options and cards that you had if you played through all the scenes. But you can get to the ending and you can take away lessons from the second room and ideas and thoughts and so on.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to like is your game doing all the things right so I can play? I just was like very curious how that works.
Oh my god, I'm not like I've specifically told you in my mail that you are allowed to challenge me.
Oh no, yeah, I just was anyway. I appreciate that, the reminder. So actually, I want to go. You mentioned that you worked with it sounds like you worked with a composer. So I'm curious. The background music is somehow both ambient and charming, mixing well with the environmental noise. For listener context, part of the game takes place in a teenager's bedroom, featuring the sounds of thunder outside while rain patters against the window and the roof. It makes the game feel very cozy, despite the subject matter sometimes being quite heavy and sometimes difficult. So I'm curious about if you can speak to more choices with the sound design.
I can't speak too much about the choices that were made for the soundtrack because unfortunately the composer of the first room is kind of ghosted me, and they just like disappeared from the internet, which is kind of unsettling. I hope they're well. But it's just like I've sent them obviously like the game design document of like some examples of soundtracks, for instance from the beginner's guide, and also like a lot of the music that C418 did for the original Minecraft soundtrack. And I also mentioned that I want the rain and like the noise of the room to be part of the soundscape of the music, which is, I think they did a fantastic job in getting that across. And this is like, this soundtrack was so much better than what I could have ever asked for, and it helped me with writing the game. So a lot of these stories in the first room were actually not completed before the soundtrack was written. So I kind of listened to the music and then just these stories sprang into my head. So this was really like what I really love about like this collaborative creative process. So in a way, the soundtrack shaped my game and not the other way around. But the second room, we are going to, I hope we can get even a bit more creative, because you can take different paths through life. You can get to this second stage reflects slightly different memories. So this is going to be reflected in the soundtrack. You will be able to get burnout in the game. So if you have burnout, I want the second room to feel a bit colder, to feel a bit more anxious. I want like the beats to kind of stumble over each other, and like my favorite idea. So a second stage has like a kitchen with a freezer, and I want this freezer hum when you're in the not burnout ending to be in tune with the soundtrack. But if you're in the burnout ending, it's off tune. So it really bothers you, because it's also like a great way to show how not being well in terms of mental health can really make you struggle a lot more with sensory processing issues. And this is going to be a fun detail that is I hope people will find it. I hope people will find it without noticing this podcast.
Well, I think that's really, really clever. I mean, I already liked the first room just because it was like kind of a mood, like it was a vibe. I was just enjoying, like I kind of just sat there for like a good 5 minutes and just like enjoyed the sound of like the rain pattering on the window, the thunder and the lightning, just like that. I think there's a term for it. It's called chrysalism. Just like the feeling of calm and like, it's really just like a word for like a whole new emotion. But anyway, I was experiencing that, and I've never experienced this in any kind of movie or through any other kind of art form or media form before. And so hearing it in your game, I think it was like the first time I'd ever experienced chrysalism through not being in a rainy, like a room myself in real life.
Interesting. That's
I mean, good headphones definitely helped with the effects.
This is my first game. I'm giving people whole new emotions.
And I think the refrigerator thing is also really clever. And I think based on what you've already done with the first room, I think it will be very effective. And I think people will notice it without.
People will be subconsciously bothered by it. I don't think people will actually like realize that like specifically this thing is off tune, and also only off tune if you're in the room, like in the version of the room that has burnout.
That's fair. But I mean, it will definitely be subconscious. Yeah.
Maybe I've been proven wrong.
Well, I think you'll find some players that will play your game multiple times. A lot of people will do that. So, yeah. Well, I mean, we hope anyway, right? We hope our art and our content is powerful enough that people come back to it time and time again. So, I used to make films, and I always hoped people would rewatch them. So,
I think my game has proven to be really powerful. Like I couldn't have imagined the amount of impact my game has on people. It just needs to actually get done, not get lost in like. I'm scared of it just going under the radar and like getting lost.
Well, with everything going on right now in the world, let's hope like all those. The only roadblock is discoverability. Like to quote something that I really don't like quoting, but like the good old days. But in last week's episode, and we discussed this a little bit before the podcast, but we know that like there's a risk about certain types of content being removed from Steam. And so I hope that this is not a concern for any future queer games. Otherwise, I'll have nothing to talk about on this podcast too. So. I laugh, but it's a horrified kind of laugh.
It is definitely a horrified laugh. Speaking of difficult games, questions.
Oh yes, so let's move on to our heavier questions. So I have two of them. The first question rather. This game feels very raw and honest, with a slow pace and vivid imagery of a queer person's lived experience, and a neurodivergent person's lived experience too. But how did you translate your own experience into this game, particularly with regards to your own experience with neurodivergence? I'm saying that a lot, but do the mind boards kind of reflect the way you think? And we've discussed this a little bit already, so feel free to take that question where you like.
So a lot of people call me brave for this, but honestly, it's kind of lazy. This character is very close to my experience because it makes the creative process so much easier. Like when I ask myself, what kind of chair would this character sit on? Yeah, it's just my weird rocking chair that I have, because it's like so great when you have ADHD and you can just like move about on this weird thing, and it allows me to like add like these thousands and thousands of details and make these small creative decisions that really like sell a character. And yeah, and just from my own experience. And I think that's the fact that this game is so much based on like lived experiences and like on my weird quirks is what makes it so relatable. The one thing that is different about my character from myself is I'm assigned male at birth. They're assigned female at birth. So obviously, it also made me reflect a lot about like the differences in experiences that I would have had if I had grown up as a girl. For instance, Lisa isn't being diagnosed with autism early, unlike me. So she didn't understand a lot of her autistic traits in the first room. And it's also, I mean, making a game with the premise of what would my life have been if I was a girl is definitely very straight cis thing of me to do. And also, so Lisa also struggles with that and struggles a bit with her body and her like social roles and internalized misogyny. And I was always a bit scared that a trans man or a assigned female at birth non-binary person wouldn't relate to the game. And this seems to be like the most relatable thing, especially for these people. So I kind of like one of the weirdest bits about gender euphoria now is feeling validated that trans men find my gender swap childhood relatable.
Well, speaking of like, this kind of goes back to our earlier discussion where we said we'd put a pin in something, but also the fact that like you were worried about how people would relate to this game, and like even though the character is transmasculine, non-binary, assigned female at birth, like I found a lot to relate to through this person, even though I literally am like moving in the opposite direction of this person transition-wise. And this also goes into misinterpretation too, and how players, and not so much misinterpretation, but like interpreting things differently than the creator intended them. So this game features a very descriptive experience of a sexual encounter from the perspective of a person who is not comfortable with their body. And like I was saying before, as a trans woman, like I still related to this scene because I've never experienced and like I've never seen such an accurate description of sex from the point of view of someone whose body doesn't match the way their mind thinks it should be. Like sexual intercourse for me used to be about kind of like, it felt like putting a square peg in a round hole. So I think if I had read a description of a scene like this in the game before I had transitioned, I might have been able to put the pieces of my identity together much quicker. And so this is less of a question, more of an observation that also ties back into what the scene is really about, which I completely missed and went over my head based on my reading of it.
Yeah. Oh my god, there's so many horrible square hole jokes I could make right now. Okay, so content warning. I didn't intend this to be about like body dysphoria at all. I actually, like, before this bit in the scene, there's like changing room stuff and hating hips and stuff. This is definitely about gender dysphoria, but this scene specifically was not meant to be that. This is actually about a fear response and non-consensual sex. And this is actually one of the things that I kind of love and hate most about my game, because when I was in the process of like conceptualizing this game, I heard the same story about the exact same sexual assault for the third or fourth time, just like with different people. And they all had in common that they were assigned female at birth and they were autistic. And I was so frustrated that this was like seeming such a huge part of growing up as a girl, or like at that time I believed a autistic girl in particular. I've since then learned that it's just part of growing up as a girl in general. And I'm so frustrated about it because like it gets talked about it so little. So I kind of like a psychopath designed a story never was like intended to, okay, I want to convey this non-consensual encounter. I want to clearly say that it is not violent. I want to clearly establish that the character is capable of saying no, but because they were never asked, we just rose up and dissociated before they could do something about it. And I wanted to make it very clear that this character blames themselves and doesn't understand what happened, but I also wanted to make sure that this character isn't to blame and that the audience understands what happened. And being able to do all of that while telling the story from the perspective of the character is actually took more time than like doing all the 3D modeling for the entire room. And I'm really proud that I managed to pull it off, and that a lot of people felt seen and understood by that scene. I've since heard the same tale from even more people and playtesters, and some of them even realized while they were playing this game, oh, I should probably give this to my ex so he doesn't do that again. And yeah, it's a really horrible thing to have to discuss in a story. I'm very glad that I'm stubborn and autistic enough to just do it anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm very thankful that a lot of people feel seen in that. And this is where it comes back to your reading of it. I'm also really proud that even though I've never intended that and I didn't think about it, I made you feel seen in a way that might help you to describe your experience to somebody else, because this is kind of at the core of Frame of Mind. This game is not supposed to explain autism to a neurotypical person. This game is supposed to be a communication aid for an autistic friend to explain their experiences to somebody else. So if you want to, like, when people want to kind of understand me, I say, yeah, just think of me as a little prince. Because like the Little Prince is a character that a lot of people know, and what makes him special and what gives him like a very unique perspective on the world is also really similar to a lot of things that I have. And it just like gives people a good enough mental model for me. And I think that's really powerful. And I want my game to be that, like a communication aid, so people can communicate like their intricate thoughts and their thought processes and stuff to others without like having to open themselves up too much, without like having to do too much explaining work. And yeah, I hope my game can achieve this. Well, and I mean, I'm glad that it does that, even though I didn't plan for some of the things I'm showing.
Well, I think your game achieves a lot. I think you've done a fantastic job conveying a range of thoughts, even if one player doesn't interpret them the same way. I think just playing like a 20-minute vertical slice from your game, like I was so profoundly moved. And also by just Ekami, who played your demo in the original Next Fest episode that we discussed, like what she had said about it too also moved me enough to actually want to go play the demo, because we had split up all the demos that we were like, we don't have time to play all the demos in the Steam Next Fest that have the LGBTQ plus tag. There's too many. It's a good problem to have, but it is a problem in and of itself. So we all said, okay, we're all going to each take 3 demos. And so I went and ended up playing the other demos because I was so moved by everyone's description, especially Frame of Minds. And so I guess it was Lynn who reached out on social media, and we made that initial connection through Blue Sky. So I really appreciate that. And I guess this is all just to say I appreciate what you're doing with Frame of Mind, and I think it's very effective. So I would like to end with one final question on a lighter note. You mentioned that the game is full of details from your life. Are there any details that myself and other players who don't know you personally may have missed?
Oh yeah, I think there's like a lot of odd German cultural things that you're probably going to miss. One of the moment when this room became alive for myself was when I had created the outside, and it just didn't have a black void outside of the window, but like an actual scenery. And for instance, that particular shade of orange is very typical for East Germany. So people that live here will recognize the shade of orange and see, oh, wait, this game feels at home. And when they play in the second room, it has the exact flat layout of a typical commie block. So when you've been in one of these flats, and if you live in East Germany, you probably have seen it at least once in your life, you may recognize it. And I think like the fact that this is kind of like an honest representation of German experiences is going to go over the heads of a lot of international viewers. And it's a bit frustrating because like the perception of Germany is very much shaped by like Third Reich and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And this isn't really what really resonates with my experiences of growing up here, because it is a very it's so difficult to put into words. The word of the feeling of like being inside while it's raining outside, and like this calmness and softness, and it's sturdy but emotional and kind of melancholic, but also sweet. this like weird mix of emotions. It is such a important thing for like, especially like culture in East Germany, and you can hear it in the works of C418. And I think it gave Minecraft an incredible sense of comfort, and nobody would ever expect that is from a German, and that nobody would ever think it's like a typical German thing. And coming from the region where a lot of Christmas ornamentations are appropriated from, I really dislike that there are so few honest German media that like just doesn't focus on like the horrible things that happened in the Third Reich, but the incredibly weird culture that has become from this, that has grown from this trauma, and that has grown from this guilt. And this is why like it is important for me to have that game be located in Germany, and also mention some oddly specific German things, such as the volunteer year of social service that we have. Like, we don't have a draft anymore right now, and you were always able to dodge the draft by doing social service instead. And when the draft was cancelled, people wanted to still be able to do like this year of social work, so that stuck around. And there's like, I don't think a lot of other countries have that, but it was like one of the most profound experiences, like profound learning experiences I had, because like it was a experiences like of working 1 year, and also like working with this, like at a place for disabled people, and seeing that like their lives aren't tragic, but their the way we treat them is tragic. This was really, really special for me, and this is why it is included in my game, even though I know a lot of people will probably be confused by what I'm talking about when this is included in my story. And I think, yeah, there's one more bit that's going to probably be confusing. So the first room is going to have a winking cat, but it's going to be a correct winking cat. Because, speaking of appropriation, you know, like these lucky cats that like wink with their left paw?
Mm-hmm.
They always hold a coin that says 1 million on it. And in Japanese culture, the luck of getting rich versus the luck of having friendships and doing fulfilling work are two different things. And these lucky cats will give you friendship when they wink with their... Don't mix it up. So one paw means friendship, one paw means money, and they're winking with the friendship paw, but they're holding the coin. And this is like prime example of why I hate this current culture of like everything is appropriated and nothing has like actual cultural context anymore. And I want to make a game that is highly relevant to its regional culture where the developers come from, and tries to make it that accessible to the rest of the world, while just trying to be as honest as possible and being brave enough to be weird about itself. And I want more games to do that, and I want more small games to really showcase the deep cultural meanings behind stuff like winking cats that we all know of, but not actually.
I didn't know that about the lucky cats, actually. When I went to Japan, my mom specifically asked me to bring her back one because she thought they were very uniquely Japanese.
And the thing is, like, all the ones that you can buy in Japan are fucked up too. Like, this is especially infuriating for me. Like, you know how horrible. Oh my God! One of my biggest culture shocks when I went to Canada, I was like, I went to a shop for seasonal decorations, and Christmas aisle was horrendous because I come from the region where like so many traditions come from, and I know so much of the actual cultural background, and seeing this Christmas aisle, oh my God, it's so infuriating.
Yeah, I apologize on behalf of Canada for that, although I don't think it's unique to Canada where that culture has been appropriated, to be honest.
No, this is not a Canadian thing. It's a capitalism thing.
That's fair. Well, I think that's all the questions I have for you. I wanted to ask if there was anything else you wanted to discuss but didn't get the chance to discuss before we wrap up.
What's your favorite queer representation in games?
I go back and forth between Life is Strange, Before the Storm. I know that's kind of a touchy one that a lot of people aren't a big fan of, but it was one of those early games that I played just before I transitioned where I actually related to the sapphic romance that was occurring on screen. And I was wondering why I felt so attached to it. But if I had to be completely honest, it's probably something like Tell Me Why, which is from the same not the same developers, but it's from Don't Nod, and I think Deck 9 made Before the Storm. But it was the first game I'd played with a trans character in it, and even though, and I was hesitant going into that game because the character is transmasculine, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to relate to this because I went in the completely opposite direction transition-wise. But I actually found that, like, aside from like the like A to B aspect going male to female, female to male, I actually found that everything else was very relatable and very accurate to the experience, despite the fact that like one of us is transmasculine and the other is transfeminine.
It's almost like trans is the actual identity that has like, and you have shared experiences even in disregard of your like birth gender. And we should, as a community, be more
unified.
Yes. Do you know what one of the reasons why I'm still a lot more closeted than I should probably be right now is because I have gotten a lot of backlash in the past from trans people whenever I post about like my personal trans experiences online, and this is really horrible because like getting backlash from trans people for being trans in a way that doesn't match their experiences is really, really awful. And I think there's nothing more effective to drive people into the closet, because if like the trans community that actually knows the struggle isn't validating you and isn't accepting the way you are, how are the fucking cis people are supposed to ever accept you? And yeah, so please don't do that. You're 100% allowed to call out toxic behavior and like self-destructive behavior. I tend to do that, like out of care, but don't try to defend your transness by picking apart somebody else's transness, because that's horrible. And yeah, people are allowed to be messy, and we should get better in tolerance. By the way, tolerance doesn't mean acceptance. It means enduring and being able to suffer from somebody while not doing something about it. And I think queer community and safe spaces need to get better at like tolerating stuff. Anyways, I was also asking myself when I asked you what my personal favorite. I'm going to split it into autism and queer representation. Is I really want to say Celeste, because so, you know this background story of Celeste.
Somewhat, yeah, but for listeners, you could refresh me anyway.
Okay, so basically, Celeste has such good trans representation that it trans the character is the developer, because I think when she released Celeste, she didn't know she was trans, but the trans community fell in love so much with her game that she then realized, oh my god, I think this is saying something about me. And then she transitioned, which is brilliant. Oh my god! Oh yes, I think my second favorite game is Baldur's Gate, because it allows me to create a character that I want to be, and it even has polyamory representation, even though Gale is. I'm still not over the way that Gale just dumped me because Harlan asked me out. I think with Karlach, this game has also my favorite ADHD representation. I can't tell you a good autism representation out of the top of my head. Not in games. Then I guess I'm going to make the game that I always wanted to have.
It's the best way to do it. If it doesn't exist, go out there and make it. I just want to go back to one quick point you made about the community, the queer community, and gatekeeping specifically.
Oh no, this is not gatekeeping. This is. Is it gatekeeping?
That's how I would describe it.
Well, it's okay. Anyways, give me your point.
Regardless of the terminology, just in terms of like, the right way to transition, or your experiences don't match mine, so your experiences are invalid. There is no right way to transition, and this is for you, but this is mainly for listeners too. For anyone listening to this podcast who's ever felt like on the edge of transitioning, or like hoping like, am I trans? Because I spent years thinking to myself like, I wish I was trans. And so eventually someday someone just kind of told me, like, if you want to be a girl, you can just be a girl. And in terms of there's no right way to transition, like my voice does not pass. My voice does not pass, and I don't want it to pass. So and I constantly see people in the queer community, especially in the trans community specifically, saying like, I saw one tweet a few weeks ago saying something about, trans women will have the most passing face of all time, the most passing body, and they will not do an ounce of voice training. I tried voice training and I didn't like it. It stressed me out. And also it stressed me out, not because it was not just because it was difficult, but because it was the voice that was coming out of my mouth through voice training did not match the way it should sound to my head. And so the way that I'm speaking to you right now is the way that I think I should sound, and I feel matches the vibe of who I am. So all that is to say is that there is never, ever, ever, listeners, let anyone tell you if you are trans or not, because the only person, not doctors, not the government, not Donald Trump or other trans people, the only person who can know you are trans is you.
Okay, I'm going to say something really funny. First of all, I was like completely dumbfounded by your appearance and voice because you were totally passing for me. And I was like, oh my God, I thought she was trans. Did I mix something up? Wait, what? Oh no! And yeah, you totally passed with appearance and voice for me. To an extent, it actually kind of scared me for a moment. So take this however you want. But also, like to speak about my own experience, I think there's wrong way to transition, which is to procrastinate it. And you don't believe what you can get away with when just trying out stuff. I mean, obviously, underwear, nobody's going to see that. You can always start with that.
That's how I did.
I was in a summer dress and was still addressed by Mr. So you can get a lot away with like a lot of gender fuckery to just like see what feels right. And there's like not much to be afraid of. Like, if you can go on a, like, I'm talking to a person that's assigned male above. If you can go to a beach in like a summer dress with flowers and straw hat, and just think to yourself, well, still a man, then, I mean, congratulations, you're really sure that you're cis. But if you can go there and think to myself, well, this feels a lot better than what I previously did, then yeah, well, congratulations, you figured out you're trans. Guess you have to go through a bit of therapy, potentially, which is kind of annoying, but from what I've heard, almost always worth it. And I think the really hard thing is what I have is being gender fluid and kind of having both sometimes, which is how you really get stuck on things. And takes a lot of time to figure out, but even then, just try out things. Maybe in settings where just like nobody really knows you and you can do something by publicly embarrassing yourself, if you're afraid of embarrassment, even though like you can't, like, other people care so little about things like that and notice so little things. So yeah, don't be afraid. Just try out things. Whew. I specifically said I didn't want to get into this topic, and we got into it anyways.
I'll leave you the option before I post this if you want me to cut this part of the discussion.
No, it's fine.
In case you're
It's
not
fine.
comfortable sharing it. But I think it's very good advice. I think it's very good advice for anyone listening.
It's fine. Okay, I specifically told you I didn't want to get into something and we got into it. So I guess that was a successful podcast.
Yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. It went a lot deeper than I expected, and I really appreciate that. I think it's very valuable for listeners to, especially at the end of the podcast as well, but the whole discussion. So anyway, I want to thank you once again for your patience and understanding as I personally, I won't say we, as I stumbled through communication with you and on the outset through emails and then for this podcast as well. You've been very patient and understanding and very informative. And I'm really looking forward to Frame of Mind, A Game of Thoughts, when it releases in full down the road.
And I'm going to take your excitement and convert it into creative energy.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing the work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to your avatars for joining me for another episode of your Queer Video Game Podcast. If you've made it this far into the episode, I really appreciate you taking the time to support queer-made content. If you want to support the show, it would be really great if you could leave a rating, review, or comment on your preferred podcast platform. I welcome you to check out the website trueavatarspodcast.com, all one word. That's trueavatarspodcast.com. You can also find the show on Blue Sky, Threads, and YouTube under the handle @trueavatars, all one word, and on Instagram under trueavatars. Importantly, if you or anyone you know is queer and involved with video games in some way, please don't be shy. I would love to hear from more queer voices in video games. Your voice is unique and valid and worth sharing with the world. And if you don't want to be on the show or know anyone who's interested, but you know about a cool queer video game or a games industry story that's queer related, please let me know. The show's official email is trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. That's trueavatars.podcast@gmail.com. You can also feel free to reach out via the website or the aforementioned social media pages. Things are tough out there, and queer people need to stick together when we can. Bye, True Avatars. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking with you all again next week. Take care and stay safe.